last train had already gone. They had missed it by approximately 4 minutes. 4 minutes they had spent sitting on a bench outside the cafe because the night was warm, and neither of them had wanted to be the first one to say, "I should probably go." This is what falling in love feels like in its early stages, Sophia thought, staring at the empty track. The specific terror of becoming someone who misses the last train. She had met him 3 weeks ago at a mutual friend's party. In the kitchen, both of them escaping the music and reaching for the same bottle of sparkling water at the same time. They had laughed. They had talked for 2 hours without noticing. She had gone home that night with his number in her phone and a feeling she didn't quite trust yet. Warm and slight and persistent as a melody you can't identify. She had turned it over in her mind on the bus home, examining it from different angles, trying to determine whether it was significant or whether she was simply the kind of person who felt things easily and should not necessarily trust herself in these matters. 3 weeks of messages, 2 evenings that had started as coffee and become something longer. Conversations that moved between the surface and the underneath of things in the way that only happens with certain people. People who are curious about the actual content of things rather than the presentation of them. A walk last Sunday where they had talked until the city got dark around them, and neither of them had mentioned it. And now this. The platform. The empty track. The warm night. The small glowing fact of having missed the last train in order to stay near him a little longer. She did not usually miss trains. She was someone who arrived early, who had things planned, who kept her life in a certain, reliable order. She had, in the past, considered this orderliness a virtue. She was less certain about that right now. The platform was silent and amber lit, and the city hummed beyond it, and they were the only 2 people left in the world, or at least in this small piece of it. Nico had his elbows on his knees, and he was looking at the tracks, and she could see the side of his face in the station light, the line of his jaw, the small scar above his left eyebrow she'd been noticing since she first met him, and the looking filled her chest with something that had no name yet, but was quietly becoming one. She had been in love before. She knew the geography of it, the early lightness, the way it made ordinary things vivid, the way it made time behave differently. She knew too the cost of it, the particular vulnerability of being the person who felt it more, the risk of offering something and having it received with less than what it was. She'd been careful since the last time about who she chose to risk that for. She'd raised her standards without quite acknowledging she'd done so, set the bar at a height that kept most people safely below it. She thought, he's above the bar. She thought this clearly without drama. In the amber light of the empty platform, it was simply true. She thought, he is worth the risk. And then, underneath that, I have already started. I started 3 weeks ago in a kitchen, reaching for the same sparkling water. I just haven't admitted it until tonight. On this platform, having missed the last train by 4 minutes on purpose. There was something clarifying about this admission, about finally saying to herself what she already knew. The way a room clarifies when you turn on the light, not because anything has changed, but because you can see it now. The shape of things visible at last. She thought about what it meant to be in this specific in-between. 3 weeks in, not yet arrived anywhere. The feeling's still forming, still becoming what it would eventually be. She had been in enough in-betweens to know that this was the most tender part of it. The part before anything was certain. The part where everything was still possible and nothing had been tested. And the idea of what this could be was still perfect in the way that untested things are always perfect. She had learned from previous in-betweens that it eventually ended to be careful here, to not invest so fully in the possible that the actual, when it arrived, could not live up to it, to hold what she felt lightly enough that she could put it down if she needed to. She found tonight that she was not holding it lightly, that she was holding it with both hands, in the particular grip of someone who has decided to hold something even if it costs them. She thought, this holding tight is new. She had spent a long time learning to hold things lightly, convincing herself that lightness was wisdom, that the ability to put things down without too much damage was a skill worth cultivating. She had cultivated it. She had become quite good at it. She was less interested in it right now. She thought about what it would feel like to say something, not a declaration. She wasn't there yet. Or perhaps she was there and simply didn't know it. But something, an acknowledgement, a small, deliberate movement toward the thing, rather than a further careful management of the distance from it. She thought about what he would do if she said something. She ran this calculation with the 3-week data she'd accumulated. She thought he would receive it well. More than that, she thought he might be waiting for it. She thought the quality of his attention tonight, the way he was so carefully not looking at the tracks, while obviously aware of everything about her, was the quality of someone who was also in the middle of a calculation, a similar calculation arrived at from a different direction. the same answer. The only question is which of us is going to say it first. The amber light of the platform threw his face into warm contrast. Jaws she had been studying for 3 weeks. The eyes that were looking at the tracks, but that she already knew by their expression when they turned toward her. The particular way he held his shoulders. The fact that he was still here at 2 in the morning on an empty platform because he had also not wanted to be the one to say, I should probably go. She thought about the specific texture of these 3 weeks, not the grand moments. There were none yet. No dramatic scenes to point to, but the texture of it. The way his messages arrived in the morning, before she was fully awake and made the morning different. The way he asked questions that showed he had been thinking about the previous conversation since it ended. The way he remembered things she had mentioned once in passing. Small biographical details she'd offered without emphasis and brought them back later in ways that showed he had been carrying them. She thought, this is what care looks like before it has a name. The accumulation of small attentions, the specific weight of being held in someone's mind. Nico turned toward her, not suddenly. He turned the way someone turns when they've been building towards something for a while and have finally arrived. His eyes in the amber light were dark and patient, and there was a quality in them she recognized as something she hadn't quite let herself name. We could walk, he said. It's probably 40 minutes. She knew he was not in a hurry to start walking. She also knew he would walk with her for 40 minutes in the warm night without complaint, without looking at his phone, without wanting to be anywhere except exactly here, beside her. She knew this about him already, with the 3-week certainty of someone who's been paying careful attention. In a minute, she said. He turned toward her. Their faces were very close already. They had drifted together on the bench, degree by degree, across the course of 3 weeks and 2 hours in this one night, until the space between them was something you could measure in held breath. His eyes were searching hers, not nervously, with care, with a kind of attention you give a thing that matters. She held very still, the way you hold still for birds. He raised one hand slowly and touched her face, just his fingertips against her cheek, feather-light and warm, and she felt her whole body quiet at the contact, the way a room quiets when someone turns off all the lights, and what remains is only the dark and the breathing. His thumb traced the line of her cheekbone, so slowly, as if memorizing, as if what he was finding there was something worth learning by heart, worth knowing even in the dark by touch his eyes closing, his face coming toward hers in the faith that she would be there, undid something in her chest she hadn't known was knotted. He kissed her with his whole attention, not urgently, but with a completeness that made her aware of the entirety of her own mouth, her own lips, the particular softness of this very moment. She felt his breath warm against her skin, and then his mouth on hers, gentle and then gentler still, and his hand slid from her cheek into her hair, his fingers curling there with a certainty that said, yes, this, here. She kissed him back, and the world stayed perfectly still, and the amber light held them both. An empty track glinted in the distance. She brought her hands up to his chest, felt the warmth of him through his shirt, felt him breathe, slow and deep, the breath of someone who has been holding something and has finally put it down. She felt the knot in her chest release, slowly, the way a carefully tied thing releases when someone who knows what they're doing finds the right thread. She felt all 3 weeks of it in the kiss, the messages, and the coffee, and the Sunday walk, and this particular warm night, and the 4 minutes they had, not accidentally, not spent on the train. She kissed him back with all of it. She held nothing in reserve. She thought, this is what it is to decide, not to fall. Falling is passive. Falling implies you had no choice. To decide, to choose this, with full awareness and no protection, and the specific courage of someone who has weighed the risk and found it worth it. When they finally separated, the night was still warm, the platform still amber, the city still humming its indifferent hum beyond the station walls. Nothing had changed, and everything had. Later, and walking home in the warm night, because there was no other option now, their hands found each other